Perhaps just when NatWest may think it has finally escaped the wrath of the free press over its disastrous handling of Nigel Farage's personal information, it found itself once again wrapped up in controversy, this time over the issue of cash. As you may be aware, GB News launched a very successful Don't Kill Cash campaign, reaching 250,000 signatures just moments ago, pushing the government to protect the status of cash as legal tender until at least 2050. I'm an advocate of using cash. I like cash. It has a physical utility, but also it means the government and my bank don't have to know everything that I spend money on, which isn't really their business. Well, NatWest, in its latest act of self-harm, has granted itself new powers permitting it to set limits on inbound and outbound payments, along with restrictions on the amount of cash customers can withdraw from their accounts. So is this a sinister push towards a cashless society, or is it merely the march of progress? Well, I'm joined now by Toby Young, General Secretary of the Free Speech Union. Toby, thank you as always for joining me. I, of course, remember that wonderful film, Mary Poppins. And when little Master Banks wants to take his money out of the bank, actually he doesn't want to put his money in the bank, he wants to buy a bag of birdseed, he leads to a run on the bank. So why is NatWest saying you can't take your cash out, which seems to me to be an absolute fundamental of banking, along with not giving out secrets about your customers? But if your customers want their cash out, you have to give it, don't you?
Yes, you do. And I can think of another scene in another popular film, It's a Wonderful Life, in which a bank run is triggered by a bank being unable to give out people's cash when they ask for it. So, yeah, it does seem a slightly rash thing to do. And you asked, is this a portent of something sinister in our future? And I think it likely is, because the leaflet that NatWest issued describing this change, justifying this change, was called Tomorrow Begins Today, which sounds like the kind of utopian language, the dystopian language you'd expect to see in a sci-fi film about the future. And clearly, NatWest is envisaging a time when we are an entirely cashless society. And that seems particularly tin-eared, given that one of the dangers of a cashless society is that it gives more powers to banks, because if they can debank you, you're effectively stymied. You can't pay your rent, you can't pay your groceries. So NatWest is effectively saying, we're going to debank people whose political opinions we disapprove of, like we did Nigel Farage, although it has apologised for that and the CEO has resigned. But nonetheless, to do that and then to say that tomorrow means a cashless society, I think is a particularly sinister combination.
But, Toby, haven't we just got frightfully middle-aged, and that actually people who are just 10 years younger than us never use cash anymore? And one speaks to lots of people who go month by month without using cash, and that those of us who still like paying taxi drivers with cash, which I always try to do, are basically old dinosaurs.
Well, I'm not sure that just because young people tend to use less cash than older people, that's a reason to phase out cash. After all, older people tend to be more vulnerable. And a lot of research evidence suggests that it is the most vulnerable members of our society who rely the most on cash, not just the elderly, but also the low paid. So if we do move away from a cash-based society towards some kind of central bank digital currency, that will likely do the most harm to the most vulnerable. And even young people who may not care too much about cash themselves should care about that. I mean, I think there are other reasons to be worried about the move towards CBDCs. There was a parliamentary report last year by the Economic Affairs Committee which said that CBDC was a solution looking for a problem. It pointed out that if people transfer cash from their bank deposits into some kind of digital currency wallet, that could exacerbate financial instability in periods of instability. How are you going to stop criminal activity? How are you going to stop criminals using digital cash?
Well, when NatWest says exactly, NatWest says exactly the reverse. But NatWest says exactly the reverse. They say that they're doing this to protect their customers from fraud. I assume because they're worried that a fraudster may persuade somebody to go to the bank, take out all the cash, and give it to the fraudster. I know there are lots of problems with online fraud, but perhaps this is also a fraud risk.
Well, people talk about CBDC guarding against money laundering, fraud, criminals using cash to pay for criminal activity. But how can you guard against those things without eroding our right to privacy? The way they'll guard against it is by monitoring very carefully how digital cash is used. You'll have to use some kind of digital ID before you pay for something with your digital cash. And that, to me, is more worrying than the various risks associated with a cash-based economy. It's like Chesterton's famous analogy of the fence, Jacob. This is an example, I think, of Chesterton's fence. Why replace something that's working perfectly well with something when you're not sure that the thing you replace it with is actually going to be an improvement? Let's try and understand all the benefits of cash a bit better and try and mitigate the risks before moving into this completely taking this leap in the dark towards something that's going to grant
Toby, we're going to have to leave it there. The two of us are cash dinosaurs who like handing over a picture of our sovereign when we pay for things. Indeed, we'd rather have sovereigns than real money, but that's another question altogether.